microphone for you guys. We okay?
You seldom do.
Yes.
Professor Hylander, before you start, I want to say something to you. My name is Paul, I live in Attleboro. I've been to a dozen of your presentations for the last several years. Sometimes I take family members, sometimes I take veterans. For what you do, I think you do out of patriotism. I know you're making a fortune going around doing this.
I wish that were true. Ask this guy.
Really?
This is the guy you want to talk to.
D-Day, important day, and I think you're a patriot, and you contribute to our knowledge of what these brave men and women did, and that's a sacred trust. And you have the brains and the personality to carry it out.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And indeed, it is a sacred trust, isn't it? And it's a sacramental obligation, that I feel. My father served in the Second World War in the Pacific. He was wounded twice. And as he would always say, because Harry Truman ended the war completely, he said, Gary, if it hadn't been for Harry Truman, you wouldn't be here. And I always counter that with, and what a loss that would have been for you and Mother. All right, that's how I volleyed that one back, right across the net. And as long as he lived, that we would volley that back and forth, and that would be a source of humor. On another personal note, my son, one of my sons, I have 3 boys, was born today on D-Day. And I so much, because of what I do and who I am and all of that, I so much wanted to have him named Dwight Hylander. And I thought, given the fact this is what I do for a living, and that a name like Dwight Hylander belongs on the Supreme Court, doesn't it? I lost that one. I've lost a lot since then. I couldn't even get a middle name in there. So that, there's 2 things, many things that bring this, home to me, today. And I want to share it with you. Do you need to say anything?
Just really quickly, thank you for everyone for coming. I do see some unfamiliar faces. I'd love to change that. So if you don't regularly come, especially there's a lot more guys than normal, I'm glad that Gary's presentation brought you out today. We have some great stuff. We have men's breakfast. We have a lot more programs coming this summer. I encourage you to attend. I know that sometimes it's hard to break in and might feel like that's a place where all those old people are and I don't want to come down there. I promise you, you
Speak
will.
for yourself.
I promise you, you will fit in. You just have to come and try something. You just have to do like you're doing today. Some of you might have been brought by your wives or friends, and I appreciate that very much. Please come out and try it. I encourage you to do that. And if you're not interested in anything regularly, Senior Olympics next year, the ones that participated this year are ready to challenge you, the ones for next year. So thank you so much, Dr. Gary Hylander.
This guy's a mover and a shaker. He's brand new, and I know that we're going to be able to have a lot of good times and sessions together. So let's get started. We need a little air here. Can we get a little air going? Thank you. Besides my hot air, because that's going to really raise the temperature. And Winston Churchill summed up D-Day this way. And I'll begin here, and then I'm going to dial back to 1943. As Churchill said, D-Day, and it was Churchill who named it Operation Overlord. This is not the end of the beginning. It's the beginning of the end. We are ashore. We are ashore. And I want to get us ashore in about 10 or 15 minutes. Can we get a little air here?
Yes.
How are you going to do that?
Okay. This should be it magically, hopefully.
Are you going to shut me down?
No, it should work now, Gary.
Is that up and running?
Yes, it is.
Can you hear it?
Yes.
That's where we're on.
The longest day. Sure.
All right.
Have the door open, right?
Well,
Today's the 75th anniversary.
I know, we're doing that at the office. I'm in the band.
Excellent,
I
excellent.
like a little fun.
So we still have folks coming in. I know the parking is tough to come by out there. I parked in the sacristy of the St. Mary's Church. All right, so in return for that, I need to say Mass. But that's okay, not that I'm a Catholic, I can fake it. I know enough Latin, that I can fake it. So let's dial the story back. And our story for D-Day, and again, the D does not mean anything. It isn't like Death Day or Decision Day. It's simply the day, D-Day. It's like using the phrase H hour. The attack or the bombing begins at H hour. So the D is simply to designate the day. In November of 1943, and here's the best place to start, we have the first meeting of the Big Three: Churchill, Stalin, and Franklin Roosevelt. Stalin was reluctant, and was reluctant to leave the Soviet Union during the war. I mean, Stalin feared, he was such a suspicious man and a paranoid man, and Stalin preferred enemies to friendships. I mean, that's how he defined things, and that everybody, he was a sociopath. And someday we can talk just about, Joseph Stalin, the man and general and murdered more people than Adolf Hitler ever murdered. That being said, the three of them are at Tehran. And there are two questions on the table at Tehran. One is that when will there be a second front? When will the Allies, when will my allies, and I'm doing that deliberately, I don't like to do that, but Stalin is thinking this way: when are my allies going to finally open up a second front on the coast of France to take the pressure off me, off the Soviet Union? We tend to forget, and I want to remind all of you of this, that World War II in Europe was won by the Soviet Union. The Soviets inflicted more casualties on the Germans than the Allies ever did. 80–85% of German casualties were inflicted by Soviet soldiers on the Wehrmacht, on the Eastern Front. The Russians suffered terribly during this war. Over 50% of all the casualties globally in World War II were Soviet casualties, both military and civilian. This was a bloody, bloody affair. For Hitler, the Third Reich was going to be in Poland, it was going to be in Eastern Europe, and it was going to be in Western Europe, and it would endure Western Russia, and it would endure for 1,000 years, wouldn't it? So the First Reich was Bismarck. No, the First Reich was Charlemagne. The Second Reich was Bismarck, who created Germany from Prussia, and the Third Reich would be the Hitlerian Reich, the National Socialists, the Nazis, which would endure for 1,000 years. It lasted 12, maybe 13. And Stalin is getting hammered by the German army. And he wants a second front opened up so the Germans will be compelled, Hitler will be compelled to divide his forces between the Eastern Front and the Western Front. Hi, come on in. And nobody's ever late. Everybody arrives in a timely manner. All right? The German invasion upon the Soviet Union had begun in Operation Barbarossa, began in June of 1941. And Stalin, when are my allies going to open up a second front? So all of 41, half of 41, nothing. All of 42. And here we are in November of 1943 in Tehran, and Stalin, suspicious. I wonder if Churchill, he didn't wonder too much about Churchill. Churchill had Stalin's number, no doubt about it. And Stalin had Churchill's number. The variable, the wild card, was Franklin Roosevelt. Both Churchill and Stalin, working that wild card, FDR. And someday we'll, next year, next year, 2020, is the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II, both in Europe and in Asia. And I'm hoping to put together just a nice series on, and I've already got the title for it, that's all I've got. And it's Duty, Honor, Country. And talking about the generals and admirals of World War II. When it's over, when it's in the bag. But that's up the road. That's what I'm thinking about. So Stalin, I wonder just how loyal my allies are. And he knew Churchill. You know, Churchill was hopeful that the Nazis would destroy the Bolsheviks, and with two scorpions in a bottle, the end result would be that the Bolsheviks would destroy the Nazis, and the Allies would walk into Central Europe almost unimposed. Game over. And Stalin said to his foreign minister Molotov, that's what I would do. I would delay, delay, and delay, and claim just what Roosevelt and Churchill are claiming. We do not have enough landing craft yet. And when we come, and this is Churchill, this is certainly Churchill, and he had Roosevelt's ear. Churchill courted Roosevelt. He spent weeks in Washington during the war, didn't he? You know, chirping in his ear, Mr. President, that when we land on the coastline of France, we need to have overwhelming air, land, and sea superiority. We cannot have a repeat of World War I and trench warfare. You have no idea how good these Germans are. We do. We fought them. We died by the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands on the Western Front in trench warfare. When we come, we have to come big, hard, and fast and get off those beaches and not wind up dug in like we did in World War I, which reminds me, you know, when Tom Hanks, what a great film, at least the first 15 or 20 minutes of it, you know, that, you know, Tom Hanks, you know, riding in and they're thumping in those Higgin boats, and he looks back and he tells his group, 30, 35 in the boat, see you on the beach. Remember that? See you on the beach. We have to get on the beach, and when they get on the beach, there are only two types of men on the beach. Those that are dead and those that want to die. We need to get off the beach and get inland. And this is Churchill. We cannot get caught on the beaches and get dug in. So they're sitting at Tehran, and Stalin, with those beady, reptilian, yellow eyes, and I'm being kind, looking at Churchill, you know, and Churchill eyeballing Stalin back, and Roosevelt, yeah, and Roosevelt, as I said, he's trying to navigate between the two of them, and telling Stalin, we don't think we'll be ready until the spring of 1944. Can't you see, Stalin? The spring of 1944? There may not be a Soviet Union by the spring of 1944. These Germans have been banging on the front door of Moscow. Army Group A, Army Group B, the banging on the door of Leningrad. Army Group C, banging on the door of the Ukraine, of Stalingrad. There may not be a Soviet Union. I wonder what your real motives are. As he told Molotov, I would do the same thing. Delay, delay, delay. We're not ready yet. So one question that was answered, we're coming sometime in the spring of 1944. Stalin. Who is going to be the commander? Now Stalin wanted the overall Supreme Allied Commander to be George Marshall. And Roosevelt had promised the command of a lifetime, and it was the command of a lifetime to Marshall, Supreme Allied Commander. And then Roosevelt had to break his promise that I cannot give you that appointment. I need you at home to explain the war to me. I need you a phone call away. I need you a 5-minute car drive away to explain the war to me. I can't spare you. And what I can offer you is the consolation prize. And that is, you may choose who will be Supreme Allied Commander. Marshall was disappointed. But you know, Marshall, he was a soldier. I mean, he, you know, duty, honor, country. And he knew Eisenhower. They all knew each other. I mean, they all came from the same school. They knew each other. Their strengths and weaknesses, they knew each other. And for Marshall, I am going to advance Eisenhower over 300 senior officers. Because not only do I like Ike, but a lot of folks like Ike. And Marshall chose Eisenhower for 3 reasons. Three. One was his likability. People liked working with Eisenhower. Eisenhower was not, a brilliant strategist or a commander. He was a politician. And he became an excellent politician during in the end of World War II. And he was a CEO. And Marshall said, one of the qualities I need is a man who's a CEO who can put his ego aside, because around that table, as they begin to plan for D-Day, there are going to be monumental egos there. And I need a guy who can bury his ego and deal with these egos. And the largest ego, who filled the whole town square over here, was, was Montgomery. And Montgomery was a major thorn in the behind of Eisenhower and in all the senior military commanders, that you Americans don't know what you're doing. He referred to the Americans as our Italians. You really don't know what you're doing. All you do is retreat. You really do not know what you're doing. We know what we're doing here. And I had to deal with that. And it came to the point where Eisenhower threatened to fire Montgomery, and I don't want to get into this. And Montgomery wrote a very apologetic letter, this is after D-Day, to Eisenhower to settle the score, not to settle the score, but to keep his job. I'll tell you who wanted him gone was General Patton. I mean, Patton did not suffer fools lightly. More about him in a few minutes. So it's going to be Eisenhower. One, he's a CEO. Two, he's a superb organizer. And all one needs to do, and I don't know if you've ever spent a day in Abilene, Kansas, but if you have the misfortune to do so, and you get to the Eisenhower Library, there is the briefing book, the planning book for D-Day. It's 1,000 pages long, single space, and every word had been written by Eisenhower and had been committed to memory. He was no goof. He was no bubblehead, as the press presented him during his presidency. And the only piece of D-Day which did not report to Eisenhower, and this is Mother Nature, the weather. He could plan for everything except the weather. So we have an organizer, we have a CEO, and we have a man who's experienced in amphibious landings. North Africa, Sicily, Salerno, and Italy. And Eisenhower, the most difficult thing to pull off is an amphibious invasion, even during the daytime. And that's why, and I'm going to add parenthetically, when this John Kennedy, wet behind the ears, got to look at Eisenhower's plans to invade Cuba and get rid of Castro, that Eisenhower, it has to be a daylight operation. And Kennedy moved it to a nighttime operation. And that really helped to botch up the whole effort at the Bay of Pigs. So Ike's got the job, and the command of a lifetime. And he arrives in England in late 1943 and begins to gather together the forces which will become the largest amphibious invasion in the history of the world. And remember the Brits always complaining. The Americans, they're over here.
Yeah.
They're overpaid.
You're overpaid.
And they're oversexed. They're overpaid
I
and
remember
they're
it.
oversexed. And we can hardly wait to get rid of them and let these French women deal with these American GIs. Government issue. So Eisenhower begins to put it all together, and the German High Command, the German High Command knew an invasion was coming. In November, the very same year of the Tehran Conference, in November of 1943, Hitler drafted a memorandum. It was called Führer Directive Number 51, which went out to the general officers, certainly on Western Front. And you can read it. It's 2 or 3 pages. And it's very clear. He's very clear about this. In the east, we've got some time. The Russians are 1,000 kilometers away. But when the Allies land, and they're coming sometime in early 44, it'll be a straight shot across northern France, into the Ruhr Valley, the industrial heartland. And we have time in the east, but when the Allies come, we need to push them back into the sea. And what Hitler did is they stripped it temporarily, it became permanently, the eastern front of its tanks and its aircraft. We need to stop that invasion. Around the conference table, and think with me in Technicolor, okay? I mean, there's Hitler standing, always standing, leaning against the conference table, and he rarely wore his glasses publicly. The Fuhrer does not wear glasses. It's a sign of ageism. And if you notice carefully, and I only know this because I don't have a life, you know, that when Hitler spoke at Nuremberg, at a public rally, and he wore his Fuhrer hat, the captain's hat, if you will, the visor is extended to be able to shade his eyes from the sunlight. His vision had been compromised when he was gassed, you know, during World War I. So the next time it's just angled a bit to shade his eyes. You cannot have the Fuhrer standing in front of a crowd of 500,000 Germans with eyeglasses on or sunglasses on. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So they're looking at the map, and they're talking about where the Allies, where's Eisenhower landing? Where are the Allies going to land? And Adolf Hitler put his finger right on the map. He's landing here. He's landing at Normandy. Normandy makes no sense. It's a diagonal shot across the channel. There are no ports in Normandy. They're going to need tanks, jeeps, supplies. An American GI needed 100 tons of supplies per day. We were well taken care of. And it's bold. It's bold. It's daring. No one would expect the invasion would come here. And you had to be careful when you compromised or criticized Adolf Hitler. You wound up getting shot. It would be a bad hair day. Or at the very least, fired. So as they talked about where they're going to land, the generals very cautiously and Hitler had a great sense of history. He knew his history. And mein Führer, as you recall, I'm sure, that when Caesar invaded England, he sailed from Calais. That when William the Conqueror invaded England, he sailed from Calais. That when Napoleon planned to invade England, which he never did, he planned to sail from Calais. And you, mein Führer, with Operation Sea Lion, when you had initially planned to invade England, it would be from Calais, the shortest distance, 30 miles, between the French coastline and the cliffs of Dover. It has to be Calais. There's a port there, and Antwerp is there. They need a port. Brilliant, brilliant idea. But we cannot defend everything. We've only got 500,000 soldiers. And most of the troops defending along the Atlantic Wall, you know, we're not top of the line. These were men wounded on the Eastern Front who were recuperating. These were ersatz units from Romania, Czechoslovakia, the Ukraine. This was not the cream of the crop of the Wehrmacht. They had already been bled white, you know, on the Eastern Front. So these are older men. These are wounded men. These are not the soldiers who marched off into Russia in 1940, 1941. And there's only 500,000 of them. And we're defending everything from Sweden to the Pyrenees. And as I reminded Hitler, even Frederick the Great made the observation that he who tries to defend everything defends nothing. We need to gamble. We need to make a decision here. It's got to be Calais. It has to be Calais. And Hitler, it's Calais. And for the Allies to convince the German Abwehr, the German MI5, MI6, CIA, if you will, internal intelligence, and this is so clever. This is a bodyguard of lies. This is so clever. That along the beaches of Calais, commando units, you know, were set ashore to clip large chunks of barbed wire. And in the morning, why are these large chunks of barbed wire cut out of the lines? They've been here. The Americans or the Brits have been here. They want to see the quality of the wire so that we bring the right wire cutters with us. And look at this. Look at all these holes in the sand and all these entrenching tools. They've taken back buckets and buckets of sand. They want to know the texture of the sand. Will it support a 30-ton or a 20-ton tank? What will this sand support? They're grooming the landing zone. They're scoping it out. And my favorite little ruse, they would capture sentries, German sentries walking along the beach, and whisk them, back into Britain to debrief them. So I can imagine in the morning when they're calling the roll call, that is Heinz Müller, Corporal Müller. He's not here a couple of times. He's been grabbed by the Americans. Again, another one, it's got to be Calais. And then, and this is hard to accept, but it's true, not because I said it, because it's true. British intelligence, MI5, MI6, have been able to capture every German agent. And they were given a choice. You can either provide disinformation back to Berlin, or we shoot you. Now that isn't much of a choice. And even Hitler's favorite agent working in Great Britain, and he was always right. His information was good, it was solid. Garbo. Garbo reported back, it's Calais, Calais, Calais. And then across from Calais, slowly, it appeared as if a division, and then 10 and 15 divisions, 20 divisions, the Ghost Army. And these are inflatables, aren't they? Inflatable tanks, inflatable aircraft, inflatable barracks. And can't you see some American private? Your job today is to blow up a 40-ton tank. And here's the box. Can you see it? And for hours and hours and hours, and I have a 40-ton tank in the morning, it's deflated. You got to do it again. Got to do it again. So we have across the channel what looked to be a 30 division army coming, and loudspeakers, and it's only 30 miles. And if you've got enough volume, not only can you project a rock concert, but you can also project the sound of backfires, of engines starting. So we've got the sound effect, the visual effect, and there he is, Patton. That's Patton, it was a Patton lookalike. There's a Patton lookalike over there. And there's no way Eisenhower's coming without his Patton, without his bulldog. And Eisenhower had made it clear in the planning, I don't want any senior officer over the age of 50. They're too old, they're too slow, they're too tired. They need to eat. And the only exception you made for that was Patton. He's my war horse. And again, if Patton is there, 30 miles away, in front of that Ghost Army, he's coming. It's Calais, Calais, Calais. Eisenhower wants to go in May. He cannot go in May. There are not enough landing craft. Those Higgin boats were also being siphoned off for the war against, in Asia, the island hopping and so forth. So he has to wait. And that waiting was so irritating for Eisenhower because he knew this. He knew the Germans were good. And that every day I delay, that it leads to the possibility that they'll figure out it's going to be Normandy. And they're going to figure out that, how many troops I'm sending. So in May, he's told we don't have enough landing craft. You cannot put 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 people, soldiers, across the channel in a couple of days. There are not enough landing craft. And Eisenhower had a volcanic temper that he kept under control. His diet, cigarettes, he smoked 5 packs a day, Chesterfield. It's a good diet. Look how healthy I got. And he drank 15 cups of coffee. He was always on edge, on top of everything. I need to know what's going on because it's going to be my call. And Eisenhower knew what every general knows, what Robert E. Lee gave voice to, the commander of the Army of Northern Virginia. The greatest difficulty for a general is to order to death the very thing he loves, the men, his army. But Eisenhower knew as Lee knew. An army is no good to you if you keep it in a cellophane wrapper. You need to commit and then hope they do their job. And he knew that. And Churchill, when we come, You know, we need overwhelming air, land, and sea superiority. We cannot get caught on the beaches. It'll be another Verdun, another Somme, another World War I. Eisenhower fretting. When do you think we can go? When will we have enough landing craft? Maybe, you know, the word from Marshall, sometime the first week of June. And Marshall looking at, Eisenhower looking at the almanac. See, what Eisenhower needed for the landing, he needed a half tide, you know, so that the coxswains, you know, navigating in the, you know, the Higgins boats could spot what we call the rhombus asparagus, these cement posts in the sand with explosives on the tips, hoping they would rip the bottom out of a Higgins boat. But if I get half tide, those asparagus are exposed and my guys can maneuver around them. By the way, these Higgins boats came in about, they were about 30 foot long. They came in 25, 30 miles an hour, and they could turn on their axis. Drop them in, turn, go back. Drop, turn, and go back. And bring it on. You know, every 5 to 10 minutes, another wave, another wave, another wave, another wave. You've seen the video. It's magnificent, isn't it? And there were 5 beaches. The American beaches were Utah and I just ran out of my head. Omaha, Utah, and Idaho. Gold, Juneau, and Sword were the beaches for the Canadians and the British. We've got 5 beaches, a 50-mile wide front, and we've got to come big, hard, and fast. Just keep those guys coming in. I used to tell my boys, you know, it comes back to haunt you after a while. Kids remember what you say, and they use it against you. It comes back to haunt you. And I would always say when they were younger, and we're packing for the beach, or we're packing to go skiing, or whatever, and I would come out, because I delegate very well, by the way, and I would come out, and I would say, fellas, Eisenhower put 500,000 men across the English Channel in less time than it's taken you to pack the car. Now that came back to haunt me. Dad, you've been painting that wall. Eisenhower put more men across the English Channel in shorter time than it's taken you to paint that wall. And what do? You just laugh, right? You know, it comes back at you, and you get a bang right between the eyes. Eisenhower. I need the right tide, and I need a half moon for the airborne. You know, for the pilots to drop them where they can see and drop these guys. So I'll get back to that. What a blunder that was. I want to go on the 5th of June. When Eisenhower woke up on the 5th of June, Kay Summersby wasn't with him yet, but she will be, all right? When he woke up on the 5th of June, the rain was sheeting down, wasn't it? You know, that his trailer was rocking and rolling in the wind. And there's no way we can go today. The English Channel looked like the rolling Atlantic. There were waves on it, and the wind pushing the waves up, and whitecaps being snapped off the top of the waves. We can't go today. And the men had already come down the cargo net, and they're in the landing craft, aren't they? And they're bucking and shaking and so forth. And these men had nothing more to vomit into the channel except their stomach lining. We would rather face German machine gunners than spend another night in this situation. And our weapons, you know, the salt spray, our weapons might not be working properly. And we're going to be in a tough spot. And Eisenhower, the wind is howling. The rain is sheeting. And he's got all of his senior commanders in front of him. And they're waiting for him. It's his call. Talk about the loneliness of command. It's your call. I know it's my call. Am I going to get a break in the weather? And he called in his meteorologist. Now this was a real meteorologist. This isn't the meteorologist in the morning or the evening, particularly the young women who think they're candidating for an Emmy or an Oscar. There is going to be one heck of a low pressure area coming down. Oh, run for your lives. There might be a high tide because we have we have a large moon. Oh my goodness. This was a real meteorologist, a Scotsman, you know, in his brown outfit, you know, with his pointer. And Eisenhower's called him in. And Skaggs has a weather map, the size of, I don't know, the size of this room, the size of this wall. And Eisenhower's looking at the weather map. See, the next time you see the weather, you're going to think of this, aren't you? And Eisenhower's got his Eisenhower jacket on, right? And he's got his hands behind his back. He always stood like that. And here's James Skaggs, Captain James Skaggs, with his pointer. And Eisenhower's looking at all these isobars like he knows what he's looking at. But he asked Skaggs, am I going to get a break in the weather? At all, any kind of a break. And Skaggs tells him, you know, General Eisenhower, I've never seen such weather in June as these storms march down the English Channel. This is January weather, not June weather. Am I going to get a break? Tomorrow the 6th, you're going to get a bit of a break. The rain will be reduced to a heavy drizzle. The wind will be here. And you're going to have, if the sun ever comes out, you're certainly going to get a half tide. And maybe you're going to get a half moon. And if you don't go tomorrow, you won't be able to go to the 19th of January. The 19th of June, rather, which gives the Germans more time to reinforce the Atlantic Wall and get ready. Now, let's go to the other side of the English Channel for a minute. Rommel, General Rommel, is in charge of completing the Atlantic Wall, you know, which was going to be like a moat, if you will. And not a moat, but to keep the Allies from the beaches. And the weather is so bad that Rommel, it is so bad they're not coming. There's no way are they coming. So I've got a little chance to duck out and get back home to Ulm, Germany. It's my wife's 50th birthday. And I have some presents for her. And it's always good to remember your spouse's birthday. I mean, it really is. I mean, it helps. It helps to maintain peace, doesn't it? So you don't want to forget birthdays or anniversaries. At least for your spouse. Guys could say, yeah, well, I want to watch the ball again. So I'm going to shoot back to Ulm. It's my wife's 50th. And I've got some gifts for her. And nothing's going to happen, so back he goes. Now, the number 2 guy, you know, he's the number 2 guy. You know, the number 1 guy, and this is a 69-year-old field marshal, von Rundstedt, Erich von Rundstedt. He's in charge of the whole operation. Rommel's number 2. I'm going back to Ulm. I'll be back after my wife's birthday. Von Rundstedt, they're not coming. They're not coming. And it's been a while. And I'm going to head back to Paris. Because I know there are some available women in Paris. It's been a while, all right? So he goes back to Paris. Rommel is being a dutiful husband. And Eisenhower gives the word. And as those who were there remember, and Eisenhower, with that weather forecast, and if I don't go today, if I don't go at daybreak, it'll be another 2 weeks. And Eisenhower, again, with his hands behind his back, 5 steps to his right, your left, 5 steps to his left. He comes back, lifts his head, and he clears the room with 3 words. He launches the largest amphibious invasion in the history of the world. 3 words. Okay, let's go. The room empty. And now he knew it's in the hands of the privates, the corporals, the sergeants, who always know everything. As my dad would say, if you need something, ask your sergeant. If you need advice, ask your sergeant. You know, he's a conduit to the men. He knows where to find stuff. There's a phrase for them. I picked that phrase up. Midnight requisitioning. Just take. Don't ask. Just take what you need. And deal with the consequences if there are any. So Eisenhower set the whole thing in motion. And if you look at the tapes, I mean, these ships are bobbing and weaving and twisting left and right. And when the wind catches the ship in a wrong way, it blows it backwards. And here is, and again, here is Tom Hanks, see you on the beach. And you can hear, one can hear, and I was talking to a Marine the other day who said we did this kind of training, and I had a microphone on, so I was pretending I was a 50 caliber machine gun, and I'm thudding, boom, 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 and that bar was gonna drop, and you guys are gonna walk into that, you know, and that 50 caliber bullet tears your head off, takes your whole shoulder off. See you on the beach. And Eisenhower had written up 2 cables to send to Marshall. One is that we've been thrown back into the ocean. These men have done everything I've asked them to do. It's all mine. Well, the other one is that we're ashore. I have no idea what the casualties are, but we are ashore. And he said, I'm following through, and he landed there 6 days later. This was so iffy. Franklin Roosevelt knew it was coming on the 6th. He'd been briefed by Marshall. And Roosevelt, who was not a particularly religious man, he wrote a prayer. And he didn't know whether or not he would be able to deliver that prayer. And he wrote a prayer to be, and he was great on the radio. What a voice. What a voice. A voice made for promises, a voice that you trusted. And Roosevelt getting on the radio in the morning and telling the country around the breakfast table, or those going to work, or maybe Rosie the Riveter, as the ship was changing, we're ashore. We're ashore. You know, this is the beginning of the end. And people dropped on the sidewalks together, and they held hands and they prayed. You know, they went into chapels, they went into churches, temples. Rosie the Riveter kneeling on the deck of an aircraft carrier. This is it. This is it. Our commander-in-chief has told us we're ashore. I have no idea what the casualties are. Before those men, those young 18 or 19-year-old men with their 80-pound kits, the airborne went in, Eisenhower went down to walk among them. And if you look at the photographs, you look at the film, he's like some Shakespearean general, you know, talking with his men on the eve of battle. And he knew a number they didn't know. He had been told the estimated casualties with the airdrop was about 85%. They didn't know that. He knew that. It worked out to 15%. But he's got 85% in his head. So he's walking among these young men. And they're so young, they're so brave, and of course when you're 18 or 19 or 20, you're invincible, aren't you? This isn't going to happen to me. This guy's going to get hit. This guy's going to get hit. Gary Hylander's not going to get hit. I'm invincible. Don't you know who I am? I'm invincible. This guy and this guy's going to get hit. And Eisenhower walking among the men and chatting with them. And they needed to see him. Man to boy, father to son. They needed to see him. And sometimes that's important, isn't it? When you trust someone, I need to see you. I need to hear your voice. I need the eye contact. I trust you. Tell me it's okay. And that can be, depending on who you are and what your relationships are, a number of very different people, can it? Right? Tell me it's going to be okay. Tell me I'm going to be able to walk away from this. I trust you. I trust your voice. I trust your eyes. I trust you. Eisenhower. And walking among the men. Where you from, son? Texas, General. Good country. Good country. Texas. How you feeling? Feeling good. We're going to lick them, General. We're going to lick them. Of course you are. You got a girl? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Do you write to her? Yes, sir. I'm going to marry her when I get home. You're getting home. You have my word. You'll be getting home. You tell that gal, back then the word gal was used all the time. You tell that gal, you're going to be getting home. You know, my dad wrote to Shirley, my mother, for 3 years. And when the invasion was being planned for Japan, he came home on his last leave. What he thought might be his last leave. And Shirley wanted to marry him then. And he said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. She said, I want to take your name now, even if it's only for 6 months or a year. I want to take your name now. And he said, no, I'll be back. I'll be back. Here he comes. All right? I'll be back. You know, and we'll do it right. And I could just imagine that. I know my dad. I didn't know my mother. She died at 25 or 26. You know, but I know my dad, and I can just see him. No, I'll be back. When I get back, we'll get married. I don't want you to be a widow before we've even had a week together. I'll be back. It must have been quite a teary farewell, don't you think? I'll be back. I'll be back. I'm your guy. You have my word, I'll be back. And he came back. And as I began, what a loss that would have been for you and Mother. We always laughed about that. Even at the end, we laughed about that. Even at the very end, we laughed about that. So Eisenhower's talking to these men, and he's got the number, 85%. And he asks, Kay Summersby was his driver. And we know they were an item. They were an item. And whenever they were photographed together, and they were always leaning into each other, smiling, like they're on their honeymoon. And this is the Supreme Allied Commander chasing the German army back across the line. And they look like they're on their honeymoon. And Marshall told Eisenhower, get her out of the photograph. Crop her. Everybody back here thinks something's up. And your wife is nervous. You know, you better write her more often. Get her out of the photograph. And he did. In fact, you know, depending on who you believe, that he had privately communicated to Marshall, I want to divorce Mamie. I want to marry Kay before I come home. And Marshall, you are the Supreme Allied Commander. You cannot divorce your wife in the middle of the war while you're about to invade the Ruhr Valley. It's not going to read well back in this country. So save it. Put it somewhere else for a while. That's before the telegram. So Kay drives them down to the end of the airstrip, and those C-47s are boarding. You know, they call them sticks. 18 men to a stick, 20 men to a stick, dropping. And I get out of the Jeep, as she remembered, and he stood there for minutes and minutes and minutes, and then a quarter of an hour, half an hour. And as each of those planes lifted off into that dark night, and it cloudy, rainy, windy, drizzly, you know, saluting each one of those C-47s. 85% of you are not coming home in good shape. And when those C-47s hit the French coastline, the clouds were still there, you know, from that storm going through. And the pilots were blinded. And they had been flying in a very tight formation, a V formation, and all they had to go on was a blue light. I'm a pilot, and my only cue is I'm following the blue light in front of me, who's another pilot, and we're all in V formations, like chevron formations. And then those clouds rolled in. Some guys went above, some guys went below, some guys went left and right. And they had no idea where they were. And they thought they were where they were supposed to be. And, you know, put, jump, jump, jump. And when you're there at the door, you jump. And if you don't, you get kicked out. You get kicked out the door. Jump, jump, jump. They were scattered all over the French countryside. And the Germans getting reports, parachuters here, 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 here. And said, it makes no sense. There's no plan here. How clever are these people? Well, they weren't. They were scattered everywhere. So I hit the ground. Let's say I hit the ground, and I don't drown because the Germans had flooded the drop zones behind the beaches. You know, and I hit the ground, and I've got 80 pounds on my back, and I could drown in 2 feet of water. Maybe I dislocated shoulder. I can't get up. But I get up. I'm okay. Where am I? You can fill in that blank. This is a family show. Right? Where am I? I'm alone. I've got a clicker, don't I? I've got a quarter of a cent child's toy, a clicker. And I hear a sound over there. It might be a cow. You know, it might be a German soldier sighting on me. But I hear a sound, and I click. And I want to hear back 2 clicks. Thunder, 1 click. Lightning, 2 clicks. So one guy becomes 2. 2 become 4 and 6. Where are we? And again, if this were a family show, I could do it even better than that. Where are we? Who's got a map? Who can read a map? And slowly beginning to reorganize themselves. And for the Germans, these drops make no sense. What's the plan? What's the great scheme? Well, there was no scheme. We are scattered all over the place. And at daylight, those first units went ashore, didn't they? And for America, it was Omaha and Utah. And the Spielberg film is shot at the landings at Omaha Beach, isn't it? And it was so hot at Omaha that out in the channel, directing in the Higgins boats, Bradley, it's so hot. I'm getting the radar reports from the captains and the sergeants on the beach. We can't get off the beach. We're getting cut to pieces. And Bradley considered these men are expendable, and we're going to redirect the fifth and sixth wave, into the British beaches and so forth. And then the word came, we're okay. And we're not okay. We're beginning to make our way ashore. So Bradley sent, he sent the rest of them in. Eisenhower showed up on day 6, and a long, bloody attack. The battle of Normandy evolved into the landings at Normandy, evolved into the Battle of Northern France. Now, what about Hitler? What about Rommel? I need the tanks. We need to put the tanks down on the beach. When they come, this is Rommel. And he and Winston disagreed sharply. This is Rommel. General Rommel. Field Marshal Rommel. That's not a bad rank. Field Marshal Rommel. Field Marshal Winston. We have to get those tanks on the beaches. We have to throw the assault into the water. And if we throw the assault in the water, a number of things might happen. One is the Americans may lose interest and focus on Japan. 2, Roosevelt might get defeated in the 1944 election. It's June to November. And with the new president, that might change the whole flow on the ground. And if Roosevelt gets defeated, and or the Americans become caught up again with the war in Japan, then no way can the British do this on their own. No way. Churchill is too drunk. He's too drunk. He's too fat. They won't be able to do it on their own. And so when Rommel went back from his birthday party, he said to his wife, listen, D-Day is here, so your B-Day is going to have to wait. Save me a piece of cake. I mean, he got the phone call. I mean, the phone call came in. Ding-a-ling-a-ling, 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 General Rommel. Scheisse! Bang! They've landed. That's a German word for shit. Okay? They've landed. And von Rundstedt back in Paris, ding-a-ling-a-ling, and this is Monique. Ding-a-ling-a-ling, General, this is for you. Oh, scheisse! I'll pay you later. I've got to get to the front. But Rommel, I need the tanks. Tell Hitler they've landed at Normandy. Calais is not going to happen. I need the tanks. And Hitler said, only I will delegate where the tanks go. Because you guys will be buffaloed by the Allies. You'll think that invasion is the real invasion. You move that way. It's like a football game. A diversion. You move that way and then come at Calais. I tell you it's Calais. And only I will release the tanks. Rommel puts the phone call through. Well, I need to talk to the Fuhrer now. Well, he's sleeping. Sleeping? Get him up. They've landed. They're here. I need the tanks. Well, he's sleeping. He went to bed at 4 a.m. Rip him out of bed. See, Hitler's work habits were dreadful. And by 44, he's fully drugged up by Dr. Morell. And so if we get the Fuhrer up, he'll be cranky. And a cranky Fuhrer is dangerous. So by the time Hitler rolls out of the sack, it's 4 or 5 p.m. in the afternoon of the D-Day landings. And by that time, the Americans, the Allies, have complete control of the air. And those tanks cannot move. And they certainly cannot move during the daylight. And even at night, they're giving off sounds and infrared light that can be picked up by the pilots. So Eisenhower, we're sure the casualties, broadly speaking, were much less than expected. At Omaha had the greatest number of casualties than of the other 4 beaches. And that's the rest of Saving Private Ryan. We're ashore, we're moving inland. The landings at Normandy have evolved into the Battle of France. And it was going well. Eisenhower kept waiting for when's the counterattack coming? See, the Germans were excellent at counterattacking. They always inflicted more casualties on Americans than Americans inflicted on the Germans. They were excellent at counterattack. When's it coming? When's it coming? And that counterattack came. We're not going to cover this today, maybe some other day. That counterattack came, didn't it, in December, a week before Christmas. The Battle of the Bulge, the Battle of the Ardennes. And it was going so well that Eisenhower was ahead of schedule and outrunning his ammunition, outrunning his fuel. I've got to be careful here. I can't outrun my fuel. I cannot outrun the ammunition. And Hitler by now, and again, I don't want to get into this story because we'll be here till 5 o'clock. The unsuccessful attempt on his life had been made. He no longer trusted his general officers. Stalin had done the right thing by purging all of his senior officers, which I should have done when I took command, but I didn't. And now they tried to blow me up. And he survived, didn't he? And the revenge was excruciating. Even Rommel got caught up in it. And the only reason that he wasn't hanged is that those conspirators had penciled in his name as a possible one of the leaders of the new German government in a cabinet. Penciled in, not penned in. And that was important. If it's penned in, it means you knew and you approved, and I'm in. The pencil meant simply we haven't consulted him enough. He hasn't bought into it enough. He knew. He knew. And of course, Hitler survives, doesn't he? Why? An act of providence, he said. And he sent his trousers, which were blown right out his legs, full of cordite. He sent them to Eve Braun by UPS. I made that up. This is how brave I am. They blew the pants off me. Look at all, they're shredded. I mean, now here's the Fuhrer standing around in his BVDs, And what just happened here? Completely, his eardrums blown out. The revenge. And I will now plan the Battle of the Bulge, the autumn mist, autumn fog. And Eisenhower's back in Trianon. Now these are good digs. He's back in Trianon. This is one of the chateaus that was by who was it? Not Josephine. Louis XVI's wife. Give it to me. Louis XVI. Just ran out of my head. Who? Marie Antoinette. Marie Antoinette. She spent a lot of money, and a lot of people's money. It cost her head. So he's in the castle of Trianon celebrating with Kay and the others. They're toasting one another with goblets, from the 17th centuries, and cake that's been made. He has just been promoted to a 5-star general. And in 3.5 years, Eisenhower moved from lieutenant colonel to 5-star general. Wow. That is moving in this man's army. And that wasn't a brevet promotion. A brevet promotion is a temporary promotion. It's like when the captain moves up to major, because the major's not there. But when the major shows up, or a new major shows up, you go back to your captaincy. This is a congressional promotion. He's got 5 stars. There aren't too many 5-star generals in the history of the United States Army. They're rare, aren't they? And even the Lord will answer their phone call. Right? So they're back celebrating in Trianon, 5-star general. It's the rank. It's not the paycheck. He only went up $250. It's the rank. So he's there, and the word comes in that there's something going on along the Ardennes, and the German troop movements. And Eisenhower, no, they're redeploying. They're getting ready, and they're getting ready because they know that I'm coming. Once I've got those young men seasoned on the other side of the Ardennes forest. And these were young men who 6 months ago, their mother was making them a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And now 6 months later, you're in the Army now, and you're in zero weather, in a tent, with very little food, because I need to season these guys, toughen these guys up. They've just graduated, they've gone to 90-day boot camp, and you're going into Germany. The Germans are just redeploying. Well, then the cables came in, no, they're on the move. They're on the move, they've broken through the bulge. And that's when Eisenhower said, this is the real deal. But that's another story for another time. He got caught off guard. And when that bulge was finally pushed back, and Allied forces moved across the Rhine, very puzzling to American GIs. As they crossed the Rhine and began to attack or liberate or whatever, German cities, German towns, that as the German army retreated, and this was so puzzling to American intelligence, on the sides of all the buildings, as the Germans, particularly SS units, when they retreated, that there was the letter HH in whitewash on the sides of all the buildings. HH. What does that mean? These retreating SS officers. HH. What does this mean? Well, it was finally puzzled out. Yeah, Heil Hitler. Heil Hitler. You know, that 8 is the 8th letter of the alphabet. And for Eisenhower, there was going to be the Alamo somewhere. There was going to be a last stand somewhere. You know, some of these militaristic racial groups that hang out in Montana, you know, they have 88 on their arms, don't they? The tattoo. Heil Hitler, Heil Hitler. So for Eisenhower, now I really have to be careful. I was caught off guard. And for Eisenhower, slow it down. Slow it down. Woody Hayes football. You know, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Slow it down. I don't want to outrun my ammunition. I do not want to outrun my fuel. I do not want more casualties than necessary. A slow, steady advance. Somewhere, there's going to be a last stand. And Roosevelt had already told Eisenhower, Stalin gets Berlin. Now he will get that trophy. There were 2 surrenders in May of '45 because there were 2 wars. The Soviet accepting the German surrender in Berlin, and Eisenhower accepting the German surrender in Reims, France. 2 wars, 2 surrenders, and Eisenhower, a slow, steady advance. I'm not going to make a dash for Berlin. He could have made Berlin. The Russians were being held off. You know, during the Cold War, Eisenhower said, I wish I had taken Berlin. You know, that way there would not have been a divided Berlin. And maybe not a divided Germany. Churchill, always chirping in Roosevelt's ear. I don't care what kind of a deal you think you have with Stalin. I don't care. What matters is this. Wherever Allied units and Russian units shake hands, that will be the dividing line of Europe for decades, maybe forever. So get as far east as you can. Take Berlin, take Poland, take Czechoslovakia. Get as far east as you can. And speaking of Czechoslovakia, you know, Eisenhower, a slow, steady advance. Where's Patton? Get Patton up on the horn. Where is he? I can't find him. Where's Patton? And Patton gets the call. George, where are you? Well, let me look. I'll hop out of the tank. Oh, there it is. There's a sign that says Prague that way. Prague? You're in Czechoslovakia. You're not supposed to be that far. Back up. This is a slow, steady advance. What are you doing in Prague, on the outskirts of Prague? The Russians are going to get all of that. They fled for that. Sometimes major outcomes come from small decisions, don't they? And I'm going to close with this. This is so clever. This is, I'm looking for, that'll work. This is so clever, so psychological, and all of us do it. You know, if you're in someone's home, or maybe in their hallway, or maybe in their bathroom, and something is a little askew, don't you? It's human nature, isn't it? As the Germans are retreating and the officers are leaving their quarters, that the explosive experts come in and they take a photograph or a painting and they tip it just a little bit and then put a charge behind it because they know sociology. You're going to come in and you want to straighten it and kaboom, you blow the whole room up. That is clever, isn't it? So, the next time you're visiting someone, remember that. That's the take-home story. Don't mess with the photographs. Don't straighten them up, because everybody will know that you've been looking in the medicine chest. So I'm going to leave with that, and thank you for your company, by the way. But before I go, maybe a question, maybe something we can draw out a little bit. Next year, 2020, we are going to really drill down on all of World War II. The Mediterranean, the Pacific, that tough old boot of Italy and Europe, and we're going to do the commanders as well, and spend some time, with their personalities, and we'll have a good time. It's the 75th anniversary. It doesn't count if you do it on the 76th, does it? It's like missing your wife's birthday, and you give her a card a month later. Geez, I forgot it was your birthday. This was our anniversary, was 2 months ago? How did I forget that? At your peril, you forget that. What do you want?
I want to commemorate the memory of my cousin who died on the beaches. Not on the beach, he was on an LCT, landing craft tank.
Yeah.
He was a signalman. They hit a mine, flew sky high.
Absolutely. And some of these guys who were the operators of the Higgins boats, that the fire was so heavy that they told the guys, get out now, and they dumped them in 15 to 20 feet of water. And you've got all that gear on, and you just drowned. And that was a problem, the chaos of war. There's Robert McNamara did an 11-part series called The Fog of War. And in The Fog of War, he talks about the 11 lessons. It's 11, why he came up with that commanders, diplomats, politicians, strategists need to consider if you're in a military operation, whether it's Vietnam, Korea, or the bombing of Germany. So, more about that later. Something else?
Yes. I'd like to, at the little thing I gave you, we have a concert at the Orpheum Theater tonight about D-Day.
Tonight?
Tonight.
And the Orpheum's right up here, isn't it?
7 o'clock.
Yeah, okay.
And it's all the music from the 40s. And we've done it, this is our third one now. We've done
Nice,
two of them.
nice,
So
nice.
I'd like to get as many people as possible because it's going to be competition of a high school band across the street on the pond.
Well, so there you have it, the Orpheum. World War II
That's seven.
music. And the Andrews Sisters, right? You can do the Andrews Sisters? Boy, that was a great tune, wasn't it?
Well,
Yeah.
we are playing all that music.
That's a great tune. They do that well, and they're smiling, and it looks like they all get along. They probably don't. There's always one sister or brother who's the bully in the bunch. You know that. I know that. The black sheep.
You think the delay of Operation Barbarossa by the Germans, because they had to divert troops to Italy, had an impact on the German assault in Russia?
Oh, absolutely. Question. The delay in Operation Barbarossa. Barbarossa was to begin in May of 1941, and it was delayed because Mussolini had himself in trouble in Italy, and also Hitler had to deploy troops to Greece and settle things in the Balkans before we moved. It cost him a month, and that 30-day, 40-day delay, Generals Winter and Distance overcame the German army and the Soviet Union. The range came, and the roads to begin with in Russia were impassable. And now they became swamps. And then it got cold, and even though the roads were icy, they still were difficult to maneuver. And then the snows came, and the temperatures plunged. And when these men went in, the initial assault, they went in summer uniforms. that we're going to take the whole thing by October, November. Moscow, Leningrad, Stalingrad. Instead, it rained. The snows came, and they outran their supply lines. And the Russian partisans, they fought like swamp animals. That was a nasty affair, nasty affair. There's a paperback. Paperback. It's, well, one is called Not for the Fuhrer, and it deals with the loyalties the men on the Eastern Front have between and among themselves. And the other one, I know the title, Guy Sagier, called The Forgotten Soldier. And you read that, you're on the Eastern Front. And it's a great scene where the men are being hit by the Katyusha rockets. And they're talking to their captain. And he's explaining why we're here. The Third Reich, Lebensraum, minerals, soil, living space. The Forgotten Soldier, Guy Sagier, S-H-A, is either E-R or A-R. If you pick it up and begin to thumb through it, you'll be up all night. You know, how does it sound? What happens next? Does he get through? And the other one, but not for the Fuhrer. Is that something? And how difficult the Russian women were as soldiers as well. And you can't trust anybody. And it's really well done stuff.
Women pilots.
Women pilots, and they flew the bombing missions.
Yes.
And they were summarily executed. And you can't trust anyone. You know, and the dogs wired with explosives and being trained to go for the growl of a tank and crawl under the tank. And the way the explosives were attached to the back of the dog, when it crawled under the tank, the explosives dipped and it detonated it. So when you saw the dogs coming, you mowed them all down. And talk about survival of the fittest. Some things you learn in basic training, and other things you pick up on the go, right? You know, it's like life. You know, some things you learn at home, and other things you learn day by day, don't you? Mm-hmm. It's like when you say, I do. You've heard me say that, right? Everything changes on the ground. See you guys later.
Oh, my knees feel better. You know, I fractured my knee.
All right, I'm going to run. Good luck.